The regular meeting of the Ojai Planning Commission for March 15th, 2023. Sherry, could we have a roll call?
Yep. Chair Quillisi?
Here.
Vice Chair Bennett?
Here.
Sorry, I'm still dealing with stuff back here. Commissioner Murphy?
Here.
And Commissioner Trent, and Starkweather absent.
Terrific. Commissioner Bennett, if you'd lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Any reason to change the agenda tonight? Lucas? Okay.
Nope.
Any objections to the current agenda? We'll move on. Public communications then. And that is the time set aside for members of the public to address the commission on items of commission business other than scheduled agenda items. I don't have any cards for it. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak on other than an agenda item? Sherry, do we have anyone
Nope.
with a raised hand?
No, we do not.
Very good. Then we'll move on to disclosure of site visits and ex parte contacts. Ms. Murphy?
I visited the site. There were no ex parte contacts involved.
Very good.
I drove by the site slowly and did not talk to anybody.
Very good. I walked by the site, like many other streets in town, and a few feet up the driveway, but I took Lucas's admonishment to heart and didn't get too close to the house. No ex parte contacts. Very good. Then let's move on to our public hearing item number 1, a design review permit at 107 Kenyatta Street.
Thank you, Chair Quillisi and Commissioners. This design review permit is for proposed construction of a first and second story additions to an existing single-family, single-story residence located in the Village Mixed-Use Zone at 107 Kenyatta Street. The zone is applied to areas suitable for development of mixed-use residential and commercial uses. The project site is between a commercial use to the south and a residential use to the north. Across the street to the east, there are commercial and residential uses. The Ojai Municipal Code requires Planning Commission review and consideration of all second-story additions, no matter what the use, and also any exterior improvements of structures that are in a commercial zone. The architectural style of the existing structure is Mission Revival, and the proposed additions complement this style and adhere to the design principles within the design standards of the Municipal Code, which you've heard in other recent meetings, and they include context, continuity, scale, and architectural design. Context here in the Municipal Code refers to new construction employing materials, colors, textures, style, mass, and scale that are compatible with the architectural character form of surrounding buildings. Continuity refers to buildings being set back from the street consistent with the pattern of existing development located in the vicinity of the property. Scale is in regard to a desire for building forms to maintain a human scale at the street and appropriate height transition to adjacent properties. Architectural design maintains that high-quality architecture be employed to avoid monotonous building elevations. The existing residence is approximately 1,137 square feet, and the additions to the first floor total approximately 458 square feet. The second-story addition is approximately 671 square feet. One of the first-story additions will be connecting the existing residence to the currently detached single-car garage. The project site is surrounded by an eclectic mix of 1- and 2-story commercial structures, as well as 1- and 2-story residential structures within the block. As proposed, the plans present an exemplary example of first and second-story additions that blend contextually and with continuity, scale, and architectural design, not only with the existing structure, but also the surrounding neighborhood. An informal window survey was conducted by staff to acquire a general sense of the number of two-story structures in the immediate area, and the results identified approximately 15 two-story structures, a mix of commercial and residential structures. The boundaries of that study are in your staff report. Other than the south side yard setback, all setbacks are proposed to be met and even exceeded. The existing residence and proposed addition of the front is set back adequately from the front yard property line at least 31 feet. The north side of the existing residence is set back the required 5 feet, and the required rear yard setback is exceeded. It's 25 feet, and it's well exceeded. Pursuant to the municipal code, a single-family residence is required to have two covered parking spaces. The existing residence was originally constructed with a detached single-car garage, and pursuant to the code, no non-conforming structure can be altered except where the structure is non-conforming by reason of setbacks and yard size or open space, but not regarding a non-conforming parking situation. That's the issue here because the garage is now being attached to the residence. And so therefore it's currently being affected. The parking requirement, however, can be waived provided that there's area devoted to parking on site and it's visually screened from adjacent parcels. In this case, the existing garage is set back 67 feet from the property line and it's adjacent to a significant hedgerow to the south. Therefore, there's ample room to park, and the parking area would not be readily visible from the southern neighbor or the street. I also want to mention that the southern neighbor there, there's a parking lot immediately adjacent.
Laurel Springs School, yeah.
A couple letters from members of the public were forwarded to the commission prior to tonight's meeting. One is related to the potential historic nature of the structure, and so staff looked into this when the letter came in, and in 2011, a historic resources screening survey was prepared by a consulting group called San Buenaventura Research Associates. This document that was prepared, there are actually several phases, 3 phases. They were not adopted by the City Council. However, I still looked into them, and it's important to note that the study concluded that this particular structure, 107 Kenyatta, was not required to have a historic resources report prepared. Second letter related to the adjacent property to the north. The letter is in regard to privacy in relation to the second-story deck that's proposed on the north side of the addition, and also the rear staircase. We have a slide presentation, and the slide is going to just show, let's see, sorry. I can go through these in this order. This slide is an aerial view of the neighborhood, and the residence has red. Oh, talking to your mic, Maura. The residence has the red dot on it, and the property to the north is just above it, and there's about a 24-foot separation between the existing single-story structure and the existing residence to the north. And the deck is maintaining, is right above that existing single-story structure. So it's not an addition that will protrude any further. And the staircase you wouldn't be able to see here because the tree is in the way, but the staircase would be at the rear of the residence and be...
it's not there now anyway.
It's not there now anyway, but you can't even see the backyard is what I'm saying. And next slide. This slide, and these slides are for me, for my presentation, but also in case the architect wanted to point out something when he has his opportunity to speak. But we have the existing residence on the bottom picture. Or no, I'm sorry. That's the proposed development, but you have the existing single-story residence there in white, and you can see just above it in a dark line where the adjacent house is. And you can also see where the proposed staircase is at the rear of the 107 Kenyatta, and where that would be in relation to the north property.
We also have an west elevation here, so.
Yes, all of these plans are in your packet. Can I have the next slide, please? This shows you the floor plan, and the second story is at the top, drawing, and that shows the deck that's proposed, and the second story addition there is with the dark border. And the first story floor plan is the drawing on the bottom. Can I have the next slide? And here you have the elevations, and it's a little deceiving that there's a deck there, when you look at the east elevation, that there's a deck there above the first story, because it looks like from here that it's just the roof of the first story. And then you have the second story set back from the front and the north side pretty significantly. So let's see. So as stated in your staff report, staff finds that the proposal is an exemplary example of additions that meet the design principles in the code, and we're recommending approval of the project. And I'm available for any questions, and we also do have the architect here.
Okay. Please, go ahead, Jamie.
I have one observation, this is to staff in general, and that is, can we not do 16 to 1 in the future? I can't see the items on page 1 of 9. They're just too small. So, and we don't, it's very unusual that we get 16 to 1, but it makes it very hard to read the typography.
Not an unreasonable request. I often request, and I can do this for you, and I often request from architects a full-size set of plans so I can read them.
No. I don't need a full set of plans, but
Okay. I mean, yeah.
what I'm looking for is the parapet treatment of the new construction. Since it would appear that the roof, is the parapet detail on the new construction matching the parapet detail of the existing building?
Which
Meaning that there's a tile. It would appear there's a tile that runs along the edge of it, and I can't tell from this. It does look like it, but it looks as if it's slightly different.
I'd like the architect to answer that question.
Right.
Okay, come up to the podium, please.
Ms. Murphy, you have a question for staff?
And not at this time.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, my name is Tom Oxner, the project architect, and specifically the answer to that question is the existing parapet on the house is distinctive. It has the barrel tiles that stack on top of each other and caps off the parapet wall. We are continuing that on the second story. Every place that's a roof, we're continuing that detail. Where we deviate from that detail is where we have the plaster wall acting as a guardrail. So that, where we have the 42-inch high guardrail, that's just a simple plaster surface across the top. But
it doesn't have tile on top of that.
It doesn't have tile. But the composition, if you look at around the building, it has a nice balance between the non-tile and the tile from all the elevations.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I have no more questions for staff, so let's hear from the applicant. You're up again, sir. Anything you'd like to add to what we've heard about the project?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, well, I'll provide just a little background. I think it was a great presentation. I think the project's well represented. My client loves the little house. I think it's a great example of the scale and the unique mission style that persists in your town of Ojai here. And the idea was really not to change the scale, not to change the style, but to add a bit of usable space. It's a very small house. It's 1,100 square feet. So the idea was to increase the first floor a little bit and to add a master suite, which we pulled in from all sides. If you notice, it's pulled into the middle of the property, the middle of the house.
Not over the garage.
Not over the garage, but it's centered. And that allows us to keep the one-story scale around the main three sides of the house. And the detailing is matching the existing. The entry is kind of unique. We're reusing the peel pole to kind of create a subtle nod to the existing entry, which is also the neighboring house to the north has the same
It's a mirror
feature.
image.
It's a mirror image, and so that's been remodeled here of some time recently as well. But I think the sensitivities that arose in the letters, I can address those briefly. I think staff pointed that out where we have to the north the driveway, which abuts the northern property line, adds that additional buffer. And I think it was a natural to extend the deck out to the parapet wall. It worked well with the massing. It's a master bedroom, so I don't see it getting used much as a party deck. I think there's a bit of sensitivity from the neighbor maybe with the stairs that come off the back, thinking it could be used as an ADU, but there's no intent for that. It's nice to have, with the size of the backyard, access from the master down to that yard is desirable. And then as far as the historic potential, it should been historic. It's a beautiful house, and she loves it, and I think that we're doing our best to maintain its character.
I had just one little nit that I found. I was looking at your page 8A6-1, the compass point elevations, and I noticed on the east elevation, the sun has moved to the north.
That's artistic license.
Okay. Just curious. I have no other questions if you do, ma'am.
Yes, on the stair leading from the back of the house down from the bedroom, is that a requirement because of safety, or is that just a desirable thing for the applicant?
Commissioner Murphy, no, that's not required by code. Code only requires a window or a balcony off of a second-story residence. But this is desired because the backyard of this property is kind of the magic place. And so the ability to get from the master down outside is very desirable to the program.
It's long and it has a creek in the middle of it.
It does.
Any questions for the applicant? Okay. Very good. Thank you, sir. Then we will open the public hearing, public comment portion. And I have one card here, Brian Akins.
Hello, Planning Commission. Nice to be here. I pop in planning commissions every so often because I try to attend all meetings that have anything to do with the historic nature of the community, as well as all meetings that have anything to do with commissions. And so that's why I'm on both of those items. A bit of history is, again, in full disclosure, I just drove by it really slowly. No one was behind me, so I backed up. And then I drove by it really slowly again, and it's a beautiful piece of property and beautiful house, and I'm encouraged in what I heard on the detail that is going to remain and be kept as a part of the proposed addition. However, what hasn't been mentioned, again, going back to the survey that Mara shared with us, and I tend to look at the Planning Commission, I look at all the agendas when they come through me. I looked at this, it didn't pop to me, but Thursday night in our public comments, Craig Walker in the public comments brought this to our attention, and so I looked at it. A bit of history, and Steve may remember this, but there was a house that was up, it was on the corner, I think it was either Signal or Montgomery, that was old, not recognized historic, but again, this house is 1928 build. And also, as they said, Mission Revival. So in 1928, they were essentially carrying on a part of the downtown that was being recognized at that time. So it's not on the historic structures of merit, which hasn't been recognized by the council, but is recognized as an indicator by the HPC of what they feel is important. Going back to the house on the corner on Montgomery or Signal, I didn't have time to drive by. They were making quite a change to a home there. The Planning Commission at that time requested of them a historic resources report. At that time, if historic resources report came before the Planning Commission, they were not required to go before the Historic Preservation Commission. When we adjusted the municipal code in recommendation by the HPC and the ad hoc, we went to that. So I guess my concern is that there's little review of this. It does seem to have historic nature. It is being recognized by the architect that it is of historic nature. That is usually determined by the HPC. But, you know, again, that's a recommendation, and that's up to the Planning Commission to determine. So, again, lovely house, historic in time frame, and we would just like to have that reviewed. Again, I'm here in support of what Craig Walker sent in the letter that he went to you today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sherry, do we have anyone in television land there that wishes to speak?
No.
Okay. Then we'll close the public comment portion of this public hearing and deliberate as a commission. I think Brian may have been talking about a house at 402 North Blanche, which was a similar style. They wanted to put a second floor on, and the Planning Commission at that time objected strenuously to making any change to a Mission Revival house. In this case, I think it's a delightful addition that's in keeping with the historic appearance of this house. So, your thoughts, ma'am?
I agree. I love all three of those houses in a row. But I think that the architect has done a good job of keeping this enough within the original look that it's going to fit fine. And I think that the fact that it's next door to a parking lot means that you're not really impacting any neighbors on that side nor in the back, because there's such a deep backyard. However, I am concerned about the neighbors on the north and their privacy and their view of having to look at a set of stairs right next to them. So that concerns me, and I would like to know how devoted they are to keeping those stairs. And what could be done privacy-wise off or from the deck that's overlooking the north? That's a question for the architect also.
Please come up, sir.
Commissioner Murphy and commissioners, the stairs that access the second story are to the south of the property line. They're not near the north. Yeah, so there's probably 40, 50 feet from those stairs to the northerly property line. And the northerly property line of the neighboring parcel consists of a driveway and a garage, primarily. The deck that abuts the northerly property line holds to the setback, and it when you're on that deck, and if you were to be out at the edge of it, you would have the garage there and the driveway, and there's kind of a.
You mean the neighbor's driveway, right?
The
Yes.
neighbor's driveway, correct.
Okay.
So, the architectural style, it's relatively simple. It uses the parapets as the guardrail, it uses the parapets as the roof edge. To pull in that deck edge would add an odd element that would need to be studied and would feel like it was a bit unnatural to the stacking of the masses, in my opinion. I don't know that the deck is really there as a requirement size for the owner. I don't think it probably would necessarily ever be used to its capacity, but it makes architectural sense and massing sense to have it that way. So I think merely the distance between the master bedroom wall and the edge of that deck is large enough to where I can't see there being much desire to even want to be out on that northern edge. I kind of feel like the privacy issue is kind of built into the size of the deck in that it's large enough to where it's not busting at the seams. So that's how I would, if I had known earlier in the game when we had been talking to the neighbors that there was a real serious privacy concern, I could have studied that. We've been designing this and in the process for a significant amount of time now, and I'm happy with the way that it is, and I honestly think that the privacy concern may not really be as big of an issue as it might be perceived now.
Okay, thank you.
I think the house sits very comfortably in the site that it's going in terms of the additional mass. And I think the design is well, as it checks all the boxes in terms of context and the three C's, and I'm very happy with it. I'm particularly happy to see investment of this sort in a house that is really a very modest house, and very often a modest house like this does not get the continuing investment that keeps it up to the extent that it would be of interest to another generation of owner. So I'm very pleased to see that. I think people want more space these days, and I think adding some space to this otherwise very small house is a good thing, and it shows, I think, the health of the community that people are wanting to invest in properties like this. So, thank you.
Well,
Yes.
anyone wish to make a motion?
I move that we accept the recommendation of staff and that we approve the conditions for the acceptance of the design.
The
for
resolution?
Yep, the resolution.
I'll second that.
Very good. Any more discussion? Sherry, could we have a roll call on item 1, please?
Chair Quilisi,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bennett,
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy.
Yes, however, I just need to point out a small little
Well, if we have some corrections to the resolution.
correction. Yeah,
Then
to the,
we can talk to staff about that.
okay,
But this is on the,
okay. Then I approve the motion.
terrific. Now, what changes do you have?
For this, did we finish the vote?
We did.
Okay. Page 2 of 7, attachment A. Second whereas. It's 2023.
Oh, yes, it's on the subject line of the staff report, too. It says DRP 22-004. Is that,
Are you talking about the?
because it was in line, this is where it was?
Yes, this is the accurate design review permit number.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just talking about the date.
It's the
Oh.
date, the date.
The date.
The date's duly noted, though, February, it should be 2023.
It should be, yes, thank you.
Oh, there, the second
Is that the
whereas.
second whereas?
Second whereas.
Right, got it. Terrific. You have your approval, sir.
Thank you very much, appreciate it, and Steffi will be very happy.
Well, we'll be happy to see this house upgraded.
Very excited, good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, let's move on to item 2, discuss Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. Commissioner Starkweather wanted to get this onto an agenda, and I agreed to make it 2, so here we are. He is not here, and I understand that we do not yet have any guidance from the city council as to what to do.
Well, just correct. That was meant to be discussed last night at the council
Right.
Hearing, but it ended up getting pushed to the 28th.
Right, so they continued it.
Right. There was rumblings of a discussion and it coming before the council. This body had that discussion, not only about housing, but also about parking. Parking then came up recently as well, I think the last meeting. So we're looking into that further. Just so you know, council is also looking at parking as well, which will be in the future. There's not a date for that one. But for the Affordable Housing Committee that we're talking about tonight, it is being rescheduled to the 28th. And tonight I'm recommending that the discussion be focused on 2 points. The first one is whether or not an Affordable Housing Committee is appropriate in this community as a discussion. The second piece is if it's a yes, which I assume that's the reason why we're talking about it tonight, then what composition of said committee would that look like? So those two points, to kind of stay within the wire framework of that. Now, I want to also provide some context. I know that this body received information from Commissioner Trent. He provided quite a bit of information in terms of context and kind of resources to use to your benefit. SCAG was mentioned. I think that's certainly an excellent resource. They're more of a fact checker. They live and die by the data, right? So the other piece, yes. The other piece that I wanted to mention is that late this evening I received an email from Commissioner Starkweather, and I wanted to read it verbatim, and it is the shortest email I've yet to receive from him. No pun intended. My only message, this is from Jeffrey Starkweather, Commissioner, my only message is that we should insist that the Planning Commission has 2 representatives and that you, which would be myself, or someone in your department serve as the staff. So that fits in line with the wire framework that I was mentioning earlier. That's obviously one commissioner's opining opinion on the matter as well, but it's open for discussion. So
Well,
with that, and then questions of staff as well.
sure. When we started this a year or more ago, the Planning Commission at the time, which was the same 5 people, I think.
I would say without Commissioner Starkweather and Commissioner Murphy, I don't think that you were here as well.
We weren't here.
Not
A
quite
year
So
yet.
it would have been, yeah,
Okay, then it's less than a year ago.
yep.
But we decided to have an ad hoc committee on affordable housing with 2 members of this commission, which
Correct.
did include
Yes,
Starkweather and you, I think.
yes.
And then one on parking with Starkweather and you. And then we put that on hold because we knew the composition of the city council was changing. And so I think we're still waiting for guidance from them as to whether they want us to take up the topic. I didn't get it, I haven't had any feeling from any city council member yet, though I don't have nearly as much contact with this current council as I had with the previous one. I would agree. I think if there's going to be a committee, it probably should have 2 members from the planning commission, so we don't have a quorum of the planning commission getting involved. I think that we should have at least 1 person from the planning and building department. And then from there, I would suggest 2 from the city council, but that's their choice. But we should have an odd number of people so that we don't have a lot of tie votes that just paralyze everything.
I would like to see members of the community invited into this. I think
Great,
that
yeah.
the subject of housing requires a broader input of experience. So I would recommend that we, as a body, recommend to the city council that they create this housing committee, that they put 2 members of the council on it, that they put 2 of us on it, and Lucas or someone he designates. I would like to see somebody like Elle, who lives over in the Becker Mallory Way housing.
Bungalows, yeah.
Bungalows. She's had a great deal of experience and wants to give input. I think that somebody like her needs to be represented. And I'm sure there are others that would come forward and that this could be a larger body. And perhaps the council members and the planning commission members could be just ex officio, not necessarily voting, but I could be talked either way on that one. What do you think?
I think that we want to be as inclusive of opinions as we can be. I don't know yet whether I would be in favor of having any number of citizens being voting members of such a committee, because it's supposed to be a governmental function to make a recommendation to the city council. I would like to see workshops. I would like to see open meetings where we get as many opinions from the citizens as we can gather.
Right.
But I'm not sure that having voting members from the public is the right thing to do. And I don't mean to be elitist about that, but as members of the Planning Commission, we have a certain different sort of responsibility for the kinds of decisions that might come out of such a committee.
Good point.
I would agree in general with the chairman, unless the member of the public has special qualifications of some sort, technical in nature. And I think that I also would suggest that I wouldn't recommend this to the city council unless we increase the size of this body by 2 to 7, just because I think these things will take time.
This body being the housing committee.
No, he's talking about
the
item 3.
item 3 on here. In other words, I think that if we can spread things out, it is better, and with only 5 members of this board, to have a parking study we want to do and a housing study we want to do, and we want to have 2 people involved in the housing study. It's a lot of non-core planning committee things that people are needing to do. So it's my recommendation that we do it, but that we also pass the next motion so that we can have a sufficient body of members of this committee to draw from for these positions. But I don't see, in terms of the size of this housing committee, and by the way, we're using the term housing committee, but earlier we used the term affordable housing committee.
Yes.
And I think that in our last meeting when we discussed it, we talked about a housing committee. And I'm not sure where, the word affordable was used by the city council last night. And I thought that we were talking about something slightly broader than that, although the core issue, I think, is affordable housing in the city.
And I think that when we set up our ad hoc committee a
Yeah.
while back, affordable was in the title of that.
Oh, it was? Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Because I think that's what we would want such a body to
address,
concentrate on.
yeah. Okay.
But
So-
I read both a long email from Mr. Starkweather and a long email from Mr. Trent, and I think there's useful reading and digging deeper on both of those for us. But should we be making a formal recommendation to the city council right now about an affordable housing committee? Or should we wait to hear what they have to say, and then April 5th, we'll take it up again?
So you have either choice. You can park it until you hear from council, or you can take forward a recommendation. The interesting thing about if you were to do a recommendation tonight, is that more than likely could be included as a part of the Planning Commission's recommendation, which is a part of, and was a part of the agenda report at last night's meeting as well. So it would be updated, obviously, with this recommendation, if this body chooses to move in that direction.
I must say, I think we should lean into it. Jeffrey saying it is actually part of, are we just going to sit passively by and assume that we only do the bidding of the city council, or do we say, no, we have a remit in what we do, and this falls within it?
Suggest some bidding.
Yeah.
I think that we also can count on the fact that the two absent members have already stated their opinions that they strongly want us to go ahead with this. So I don't feel badly that it's just the three of us voting on a recommendation. So I so move.
I'll second.
Now, what are we so moving on?
Motion
if we could
is
get
that
The
we
motion-
recommend that we do have an affordable housing committee with 2 planning commissioners, 1 member from the planning staff, and as many members as the city council chooses to add, which would probably be 2, so they don't have a quorum on the committee.
And
And that we do our very best to get,
to include the public.
to include public opinion with as many meetings as we think are necessary to provide a good recommendation to the city council.
Can I ask 2 questions
Yes, sir.
for clarification? So, Commissioner Bennett, you had mentioned, actually it's Vice Chair Bennett, you had mentioned that the 5 to 7 was an important piece if there were going to be 2, correct? So
That's correct.
if this body ends up becoming 7 versus 5 at its current role,
We could actually have 3 on the committee.
it would be 2. If it remains at 5, is it still 2,
Right.
or is it 1?
May I make a suggestion that we couple both of these into two recommendations that are being approved in the same vote, And if there's further discussion required of the question of 5 to 7, that we postpone a vote on this until we've done that and try and take care of it all at once.
Okay.
I agree that we could postpone it. I don't think we should couple it.
Okay.
We can switch the order of 2 and 3 around
Right.
if that's what you're
Yeah, I guess that's it,
suggesting.
yeah,
But I don't want to see us take one vote on the 2 together.
Okay,
Okay. All right.
I'll accept
So
that.
should we
I'll accept that.
hold off a vote on item 2 until we have discussed item 3?
Okay, so it's a pause on item
We'll
Pause.
pause
2.
the discussion, the deliberation on item 2, and go to item 3. Consider forwarding a recommendation to expand the planning commission from 5 to 7.
Okay. Before we move to item 3, I want to remind this body that we have not opened it up for public comment, and we should do that before voting on it. Not necessarily that we have to do it now,
No,
because we're going to do it for item 3, but remind me so that we don't lose track of that.
We'll pick up public comment on item 2 before we finish. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to item number 3. So this is an item that was brought for, sorry, I got the wrong.
I
This
do
is an item-
remember this from last night, I think.
Yes, yeah.
No, it
Was
was,
the previous?
no, it was, yeah, it was the
previous-
previous meeting.
Well,
So it was
Previous
brought up
meeting,
by the city council at a previous meeting, I believe it was the end of February, where it's been sent out to all commissions, not just this body, but every commission, as to the number, because currently each commission has 5 members. At one point, I think 2019, leaning to 2020, it was 7. So this body, as well as Historic Preservation Commission, Arts Commission, Rec, all were 7. And then we're whittled down to 5 in 2020, I want to say. And that's where it's remained since then.
Do they have to all be the same number, or can one commission be at 5 and another one at 7?
So, and correct me if I'm, so state law, I think, requires a minimum of 5, but you can have as many, I've seen cities have as many as 9. So those tend to be larger cities.
But if if there are vacancies, then there are vacancies, but you still
One of
have
the-
open seats.
Right. One of the reasons that I remember being discussed when I was attending those city council meetings was the lack of applications. That was one of the reasons why I went from 7 to 5. I don't know that that's necessarily the case today, but it certainly was a consideration and one of the reasons why I went from 7 to 5. So tonight, for discussion with this body, is 5 appropriate, or is 7 better? And that's up for this body to discuss. And then based on that conversation and potential recommendation forward, obviously we'll include that, staff will include that in a future agenda.
2 separate recommendations, yeah.
Correct.
But legally, I didn't hear an answer to my question. Could the HPC be at 7 and the Planning Commission at 5?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you.
I think city council is asking each commission what it would recommend for its size.
For its own purposes.
Correct. I'm sorry, I thought I had answered it by
Oh,
saying the
okay.
minimum is 5, so.
Okay. I think our commission size is appropriate. I think it's a well-functioning commission. I don't see a need to go to 7. I think you have someone who wants to talk, but it's not public.
This is
communication
item,
at 3.
oh, I'm sorry. Have we asked all the questions that we need to ask of staff? All right, then we will open the public comment portion of this item. Brian Akins.
So Brian Akins, Chair of the Historic Preservation Commission, and the only person in this room that actually was at that meeting that night. So, and been around for a long time 8 years, 7 months so far and counting. So as Chair Quillisi knows, there used to be 7 commissioners. It was that way for a long time. 5 was always often brought up. Johnny Johnson thought it would save costs going to 5 from 7 to 5. So they said, well, let's ask the commissions. They went to the commissions, I don't know, 3 times during that time frame. All the commissions said unanimously they wanted to stay at 7. We did in the HPC. However, then came to where the council was by district, and when they went to the 5 districts, that was a motivation for the council to, at that time, again, 2019, 2020 timeframe, to then switch it from 7 down to 5. And they did that rather than saying, hey, you have 7, we have 5, 2 of you are gone. They did it, if I remember right, through attrition. They just didn't appoint vacancies. And that attrition took different times for different amounts. One of the commissions was actually left at 7 for a little while. Other commissions fought to stay at 7, but they were moved to 5. We had people on our board who felt like we should always be at 7. When we first started the Downtown Historic District effort, we had 7 commissioners. Therefore, we could have 3 of those commissioners on our ad hoc. The 3rd commissioner on that ad hoc was Commissioner, our Vice Chair Combry, who brought all kinds of wealth of information to us. When we went down to 2, she excused herself. So we've had that for the years. So now we have a new council, and the subject came up again. Again, we have people who, have, their priorities, and so it was a priority. It was talked about with different people, and it did come up, and it came up in this meeting because in that meeting we had Council Member Lang, who was the one making, we had 2 vacancies. We were at 2 residents, one non-resident, that's me. And so they were appointing Rick Bisaccia as our 4th commissioner. He's resident. And so that's why the discussion took place in that time frame. And it was actually, I think, and one of the consent items that got pulled, I think, yeah. And so as a part of that conversation, then Councilman Whitman said, and another part of it, somehow in the efforts for the Downtown Historic District came in, the hindrance that the 4 people, or that the commission did not, supposedly by agreement in January 18th when we had a joint meeting, that the commission would get very, very limited staff time, staff support from the city, that they would basically be functioning themselves. So part of that discussion, and this new council has basically told us to go ahead. So Councilman Whitman said, well, we're moving this forward. I understand that they're getting little, if any, lack of staff, again, because of the limited amount of staff time that was available. I think it would be beneficial to have the HPC go from 5 up to 7. And so they had a bit of discussion on that. And then, although they couldn't take action, the action they did take was to set a date in the near future. And then they set a date specific, and that's the first meeting in April. In order for us as the HPC, because we would meet 2 days after that meeting, we met last Thursday and discussed this in depth. And so after that discussion, we voted in our HPC to support moving to 7 and making that recommendation to the city council. So that's what we did. If you have any other background you need to know, I've been to every commission meeting and discussed since then too. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Did you want to expand on your former remarks on the size of the commission?
No,
I'm sorry.
they were not done in a
Sherry,
timely
do we have anyone out there that wants to speak on this?
No, we do not.
Okay, then we're going to close the public comment portion of this public hearing.
No, I would like to see 7 rather than 5. I
Just to
certainly,
spread the work?
Yeah, spread the work, and also, yeah. So if it's necessary to take some time off for a vacation this summer, it doesn't threaten a quorum, and, there's still a significant number of people for a discussion.
Okay?
Sounds like a safety in numbers, yes.
Yeah, that's.
To add a little background to what Brian had to say, I was here when there were 7 members on the, on the Planning Commission. The meetings tended to be a lot longer because we had more people with opinions, though I don't know that any of the decisions were changed. At the time when the decision was made by the city council to go from 7 to 5 by attrition, by not filling vacancies when they occurred, at that point, the Planning Commission was already down to 6 because we had 1 resignation, and shortly thereafter we had a 2nd resignation. So it was, for the Planning Commission, it was a very smooth transition to having 5 members. My feeling, having been 3 years or so with 7 members and 3 years or so with 5 members, is that 5 has worked more efficiently. But it's also heavily dependent on who the 5 people or who the 7 people are. I do note in favor of expanding the commission that we did have more applicants than we had open seats this time. We had 2 vacancies, and we had 3 applicants for those 2 vacancies. And my personal opinion was that the 3rd applicant would have been a good person to have on the Planning Commission. But having 6 or any even number is an awkward thing because you wind up with the potential for too many tie votes. And we didn't have a 7th applicant or a 4th applicant for 2 seats. At the moment, I would lean in favor of staying at 5. If there's a lot of interest in the community for joining the Planning Commission, and we find qualified people to do that, or if not qualified by experience in planning, at least qualified by experience in business or government service or something, then I'm happy to revisit it. My feeling was that we worked more efficiently with 5, particularly the 5 that we have right now. These are dedicated, detail-oriented, thoughtful people that I'm really happy to be a part of. And I'd certainly be happy to look at it again if the opportunity presents itself. But I would hate to say, okay, we're going to go to 7. We have now 2 seats to fill. If we only have 1 applicant, and I would think we would get this same applicant again, that would be awkward. And I'd rather not do that.
We could think about the timing of this whole situation also. I rather suspect that the council is not going to act quickly and put together these parking and affordable housing committees. If down the road we find that we are members of both of those committees and it's too stressful, at that point, I would suggest we review again the opportunity to go to 7. I don't see a need to do it now.
Fair points.
Do we need a vote?
Straw poll seems to be 2 to 1 is what I'm saying, which is what I can take to.
I will withdraw my
It doesn't have to
No.
be
You've
unanimous.
been,
I know, but I'll withdraw it with Commissioner Murphy's idea as a revisit of this issue at such time as we add a parking committee or a housing committee, which would
Yeah.
potentially strain the resources of the current members.
Yeah. And I'm willing to revisit it at any time.
Yeah.
I just, from my experience,
Yeah.
this size worked better, so. Okay, let's go back then.
okay, so it sounds like that's a 3-3-0-2, right?
Do
To,
you
By
want to take a
acclamation.
vote, or?
well, no, I
Just
just
to-
want to make sure, and then what I'll do is I'll put the asterisk that, that with the opportunity to revisit in the future, if the commission feels strained, given,
Especially
tasks
when
and
we have two
duties.
more voting commissioners here to
Yeah.
consider the question.
Yeah.
Yep, I can add that in. Sure.
All right, now we're back to item 2, discuss the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. I should ask at this point if there's anyone here present who wishes to speak on this item. Not seeing, Brian's shaking his head no, and he's the last person in the room. Sherry, do we have anyone out there who wants to speak on item 2, the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee?
No, we do not.
All right, then we'll close that portion of this discussion item and come back to do what? Should we recommend that there be one without specifying size and composition? Or should we recommend there be one and recommend a size and composition? Or should we wait until city council sorts out the question?
I thought I had a motion on the floor. Did that disappear with the pause?
Oh, no,
You
there
did.
wasn't. There
did.
wasn't. There
We-
was a motion on
We
the floor.
paused. So the motion was 2 commissioners, 2 council members, 1 staff member, and then
Extensive public input.
extensive public input is what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
But the caveat with the 2 was if it's a body of 7.
But we
So, yeah,
So that
this
which would
body
now
just
be
voted on.
Would now be removed.
blew past that.
Right.
And by having 2, that makes it convenient for the city council to also have 2. And no one outvotes anyone,
Right.
so. I move,
You
You're
had already
calling the
made a,
question.
she already
I
made a
ca- yeah, I
second.
moved
We needed a
already.
vote.
I'm sorry?
Commissioner Murphy had already seconded it. We were just waiting for the, either more discussion or the vote.
Right.
The
Commissioner
vote.
Murphy made the motion and Commissioner Bennett, Vice Chair Bennett, seconded the motion. So let's have a vote, Sherry.
Chair Quilisi,
Yes,
Vice Chair Bennett,
Yes,
Commissioner Murphy.
yes.
terrific.
All right.
It's not,
All right, let's move on to item 4. And that is upcoming future agenda items. Someone said that oh, there it is, Ojai Mountain Farms, okay. There was another one, someone said to me was coming before us shortly, but it's not on this list. Are there any others that you think of as in process? or
There are
pending?
several others. Let's go through each of these
Okay.
dates, and then I can talk just broadly about pending. Okay, so April 5th, which is our next regularly scheduled meeting, we have tentatively scheduled. We haven't sent out the notice yet because we have a 5th Wednesday this month, so we're actually not sending the notice out till next week.
Mhm.
But this is
That's
what we're
3
looking
weeks
at.
to the next meeting.
Yeah, exactly. We're looking at a variance for a fence height for a pool in the front yard area at 510 East El Paseo Road. I encourage this body and anyone listening to drive by and just to see what that property looks like. It is, it's unusual, which is not unusual for this community to see that, especially in that area. Those lots tend to be a little
This is
bit
across the
unique.
street from the schools.
It is
Oh,
not
no,
across the street from the
510.
schools. It's further to the east.
510, it's east of Bristol.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. It's a little further east.
And is this one of those funny things where the front yard is defined as the shorter footage along a street? That's why it's front yard?
I don't want to get into the details yet, but I will say this. The front yard is extremely large and wide in terms of its,
Yeah,
the
it
breadth
curves there,
of-
right?
Yes,
Yeah,
it
it's
has
on the
more of an
inside
arch
of the
to it,
curve, so.
an arc to it, which creates kind of a unique scenario and situation. And then you start unpacking definitions in terms of how we identify and define front yards versus side yards versus rear yards, street side setbacks, and then it becomes pretty glaringly clear why this is the front yard. So that item is tentatively scheduled for the 5th, as well as the parking discussion that was brought forward by Commissioner Trent and I believe Starkweather. So that'll be on the next agenda for discussion as well.
Similar to tonight's discussion of an affordable housing advisory committee?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. But I'm not quite convinced that City Council will have something on their agenda before we have this on our agenda. So it's one of those where we can discuss, ask for additional clarification, or take forward a recommendation that then is forwarded to City Council.
We're recommending that they ask us to do this in the
Right.
case of affordable
Right.
housing.
It's the ask, and then we'll see what council says. And then, so April 19th, it's interesting. It's only showing general plan.
On the 5th, what's
Update.
involved in the general plan update? Are there other elements that we're going to discuss?
Is there another, do I have that as an item on this agenda tonight? Because if not, I'll mention it. Can we pause for that? And can I mention it during my
Director's report?
Yeah,
Sure.
director's report. I'll mention it then. That way we're not cross-talking here tonight.
All right.
So just remind me to do that when we get there, because I have it.
We'll just take
have it on
general
here.
plan update to be a part of the director's report in any given meeting.
At any given meeting, it could be, be
Okay.
included, and I have some information to unfold when we get there. There isn't an item on the 19th, but I know that there are a number of items that will likely be close to, if not ready. So I see no reason to even
should meet.
consider, the cancellation or even
Okay.
hinting towards that. So pending, we have 3, but there are many more that we're looking at right now. These are getting close, but there are others that are looming as well, meaning we've sent out corrections, we're asking for additional information, so they're moving forward. And then we've received new applications even this week, so we're not slowing down. Advanced planning is in the same boat. We're putting stuff together. There are housing element pieces that we need to start moving on. Even though we haven't officially been adopted, the city council's adopted it, but for whatever reason, HCD thinks that we're not close enough yet, or we're getting close, but not close enough.
The rock is not shiny enough yet. Go
Yeah.
polish it.
I don't want to get into the details of that.
Okay.
Because it's not an agenda item, but we're working towards, and he's writing notes, of course. We are working towards something coming back to council in the very near term.
Chairman snarked at the HCD.
You're not the only one. So anyway, that's it's very likely you could start seeing some advanced planning work coming before this body as well. So
Okay, I did have one other question.
okay.
There has been a lot of discussion, and I don't know if it's been in the newspaper or if it's just been emails that I've been getting about 3-story senior housing on a 2-acre parcel on Bryant Street. Is that a case that is going to come before us? I've heard Cabrillo is involved. Is that a case that the Planning Commission will see? Or is it something that bypasses us because it's affordable or senior or something?
So the SBL language, Hold on. I don't know that I can go into too much detail on this one, but I'll just give you the broad stroke.
That's
From
all
a
I'm looking for.
processing standpoint, two things. One, there hasn't been a formal application submitted by and through the
Anyone.
Community Development Department at this point.
Okay,
Two, if an application does come in, it's two-part because it's within the SPL overlay zone. The first is a zone clearance, that doesn't come before this body. But the second is a design review permit, or a DRP. That would be before this body. With an asterisk, it has to be objective standards and not subjective standards. That's new state law. So those are the things that this body should be thinking about when this item comes forward. And I anticipate that it will. We've been in conversations with that group that you mentioned.
okay. One other kind of related question. This goes back to prior planning commission action that I don't recall seeing any corresponding city council action yet, and that was moving the language about VMU from the commercial and manufacturing districts portion of the code to the special districts portion.
Yes.
Has the city council taken up our recommendation that they do that?
Not yet, but it is on the long list of items for the council to be hearing in the future.
Because,
Same thing is true for Title 10.
oh yeah, and that's a lot of reading and no telling when the time will be available for that.
So both of those items are in queue. I don't know. I don't have a direct timestamp on when that's coming
Okay.
forward to them.
The other thing that I was curious about, because I went back to the code yesterday, and I was looking at, I think it's table 2-3, but I'm not positive, and that's, maybe not, 2.5. Anyway, it was the general development standards for the commercial and manufacturing districts, which is where we find the VMU stuff right now. And I looked at the row in that table that talks about height. And sometimes it had a height number, and sometimes it had a height and number of stories number. And I had heard that this project that may come up on Bryant Street was looking for 3 stories, and it doesn't appear to be legal.
I
So-
can't get into the details of it.
Yeah.
I apologize. One, because it's not an application, and two, because the application hasn't, let's say it is submitted.
Or it requires a waiver or something.
Well, it requires it to be on the agenda, so I can't go into the details
Okay.
of it.
Okay, go ahead, Jamie.
Well, it's on the same subject, and you know my position on changing what can be built in the Bryant Street and Bryant Circle area. I think we have to make, I'd like to see that whatever process we use uncouples the height of the building issue and things like that from the question about do we want to reduce the size of our manufacturing area? That's there for jobs, and at the moment, we're talking about housing, but, life will swing around, and it's our only place where we have any light manufacturing. And the minute you fill that building, you've got a bunch of voters who are going to be not interested in having smells and noises and trucks and the things that you get in a light manufacturing area. You have voters, and guess what? You'll never get it back. You'll never get the construction. You'll never get the place that we've set aside for
An
growth.
aggrieved group.
Absolutely.
Duly noted. However, we cannot debate this matter right now.
Yes. No.
Oh,
No,
but I
I'm
was
not
just
asking-
about to jump
Sorry,
in.
I'm
Commissioner
not
Murphy.
asking, no, I'm not asking it to
It's
be
an-
debated right now. I'm asking that we have a process which gives full ventilation to that issue, before we're jammed into deciding on
On a particular.
a particular project.
Look, I'll provide the background on it, but I believe our hands are tied to a certain degree at this point.
Why?
Given I can't get into the details of it. I can't get into the details.
Epi can tell us.
No, he can't.
I just don't want to get into it, but I will say, not speaking about any projects here or forever or in front of the commission, but there are state law housing guidelines and state laws themselves which preempt certain local control
Like base zoning.
to a degree.
Yeah.
I have a strong feeling that's going to be unpacked with the staff report. So
Okay.
I don't want to get into any more details on it because I don't want us to get in any more trouble.
We don't want to start opining on a
Correct.
case that hasn't come before
I
us.
have no
Yeah.
interest in opining on it now. I just opine on it every time I have the chance.
Okay. Well, let's move on then to director's report. You have more material for us, Lucas.
I do. I have a little bit of information in terms of updates, and I'll talk a little bit about general plan as well. So maybe a month ago, I had brought forward a discussion and an update saying, hey, formula business is coming. Are you aware of it? And I think I had a tentative date of March 7th. Well, March 7th has come and gone, and it wasn't ready by March 7th. However, you did?
Yes, I did.
To an empty room, more than likely. I apologize.
What's going on?
I apologize. Yeah, it ended up getting moved to the 21st, which is now the hard date. We've sent out flyers. There's all kinds of information, which is next Tuesday. So here's the piece of information that I want to pass along to this body. Because this item is going to be coming before this body more than likely once more, you're encouraged to attend as a listener, but I would discourage you from participating, meaning making comments that could potentially show a discretion or opposition or support in one way or the other. And we'll also have it virtually, so it'll be on Zoom as well, and it'll be on Channel 10.
Okay.
So that's the news.
It's an even better way to listen without participating.
Yeah, and the nice thing about this body and the three of you, there's been a lot of discussion that's come before this body. And at one point, the thought was it was the last time we had talked about it was the last time we were going to talk about it. Unfortunately, that city council at the time said, nope, back to the drawing board. We want a little bit more information. Squeeze a little bit more juice out of that lemon, per se.
We were talking about a quantity of similar businesses and about new criteria for deciding whether something was a formula business.
Correct. It's boiled down
And they want a more
to
definitive recommendation from us, you think, in the future?
correct. Well, at one point we'd actually brought forward an ordinance, and I think that was maybe the first meeting, which this body felt was way too fast, rightfully so. But we wanted to show that we were eager, staff was eager to move forward with it. So instead, we did a lot of research, brought that forward to this body. And I think looking back on it, I think at least 4, maybe 5 times it's been before this body. Equally, it's been before city council at least 4 times. So this isn't something where it's brand new. But with the community input session, there are individuals that will have not even heard of this. Or if they have heard of it, they haven't been part of the process. So they're going to feel like they're coming late to the game. And I expect that on the 21st. So it's informing, providing the history, and really kind of bringing everybody up. You know how you always say, setting the table? It's the same thing that will likely happen on the 21st.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jim.
It's a question. I was concerned about it. I was going to go myself, and I thought, no, it's going to be a workshop, and so they'll have breakout sessions and.
No, we're not doing that.
You're not
That's not the
doing
plan.
Okay.
Right. As a new planning commissioner, I really appreciate the fact that you're going to have a presentation and give us the full story, because that whole last meeting, which was my first, was very confusing
Yep,
for me.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
So-
setting the table in terms of telling people what the current formula business ordinance applies to and what it does not,
Right,
which is a longer list.
yep,
That's
true.
Is very important, because I think that's one area where the citizenry in general doesn't understand what the provisions are.
right. So that's the first item that I have an update on.
Great.
The
Say at 6 or so.
oh yes, that's a good point. I wanted to plug the time and location. So next Tuesday, 6 to 8 p.m., Kent Hall. And when I say it's a community input session, it's the community as well as the business community. So it's the community at large as well as the business community. We've already sent out information to the chamber. They forwarded it on to their members, and I've gotten a list. I'm going to more than likely hand deliver to those interested parties as well. So hoping to have a full crowd, although I don't know that we've necessarily had that when we've had it before this body. As a community input session, it's likely more will come out.
People know the word formula and they know the word business, but when you put them together, it's a mystery.
Yeah,
for
and
most folk.
the interesting thing about the dynamics of the formula business ordinance itself is I've heard from community members that the number was 3 or the number was 5, but the number is 11. With
Or
the
10.
moratorium,
Or 10. There's
10 plus 1. And there was the argument of 10 too. That's correct. Right now the moratorium has 5. That's pretty well set. So
It's 5, except nobody can have anything right now anyway, because there's a moratorium.
the moratorium limits the number. So you could still have. I don't want to get into the discussion on that. Tuesday. So anyway, that's the first item. The second item I wanted to bring to this body just as an update. So, what was it? Back in August, we had a community workshop. Kind of unpacked a lot of really good pieces of information. Had the consultant down from up north, and I thought I had really good breakout sessions. And from that, we're now creating and piecing together, kind of stitching together what's referred to as the preferred alternatives. And that's for land use, that's for transportation, that's for safety. Now, obviously, within that framework, there was 5 elements. There's also the housing element, which is it's going through its final stages. Hopefully, fingers crossed, HCD certifies it. And then the other is environmental justice. So,
Isn't there an air quality element?
yes, there are other ones that will be made consistent, updated to be consistent with
Update to state law.
correct.
Okay.
But not necessarily an overhaul like what we're seeing with these other ones. So that is actually being worked on currently, and it's looking like we're getting close. So what's the next step? Once that document is ready to be viewed by the public, the next step is a joint meeting.
I thought it would be a red line version before the planning
Nope,
commission.
not yet. Not yet. But that's coming.
The joint meeting
Yeah,
of whom and whom?
Thank you. It'll be a joint meeting with the planning commission and city council.
Do you have any idea when that might happen?
I do not.
Okay.
But I want this body to understand that we are getting really close. And once that document is ready to be unveiled, we will be setting a date.
And this will be with 2 or 3 different elements to consider in a meeting?
Correct.
Okay.
And it will likely have the consultant here as well, either in person or virtually,
Okay.
leading the way.
How thick is this document?
That's
I'm looking
not
at it right
s-
now, and it's pretty detailed.
Not something we can do in the usual 1-hour joint meeting with city council.
The
We rarely
Yeah.
get through really more than one good topic in that.
It'll be longer than an hour.
Yeah.
It'll have to be longer than an hour.
So probably a different night or whatever.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be on a Wednesday. But what we're doing is we're narrowing that down. We're looking at dates, we're looking at finalizing. But I wanted this body just to recognize that when it pops up, don't feel like it's a surprise, because we'll be looking at whether or not you're going to be available on those dates. So
Looking forward to seeing those
a lot
pieces.
of moving parts for that one.
Okay. Commission member reports? Anything of interest? All right. City council liaison's not here. Therefore, seeing no other business before the commission at 7:27, we're adjourned.